great to see you this morning. I'm Rita Hickman, body-mind expert, shiatsu massage therapist, and I help women in narcissistic and toxic relationships get back on the right track. Maybe leave or find a different job, or find the strength to find their voice, or even dig deep into the compassion that they want to have for the people that they care about. And today we are talking about how narcissistic verbal abuse changes your brain. So this morning I read a great article on verbal abuse and the effects that it has on how our brain works. And one of the things the article talked about was, it was a Harvard study that made the connection between the effect on the brain of bullying or verbal abuse, family member, whatever, when you're an adolescent, has the same effect on the brain as sexual abuse outside the home, the same effect as if you witness physical abuse, and all sorts of other traumas like that. And the bullying can happen online, it can happen in person, both, doesn't matter. So let me give you a little bit of information about trauma, especially trauma when someone is a kid. So when someone's a child, they don't have the tools or the maturity to process through or to handle what's going on in their lives. And that's one of the reasons that kids need such a supportive, loving, warm environment, is because they just don't have the tools. And they won't have the tools, all the tools, until at least 28. And then even for us, for everybody, there's so much work that needs to be done, especially if there was emotional damage of some sort. And when a child is traumatized, and trauma is when something unexpected happens that they have no control over, and they're not able to process through it, that's considered trauma. And when I was reading this article, I specifically thought about how every day my dad would come home. He was a teacher. And when he came home from work, I'd be on the couch. And just the sound of his car coming into the driveway, my heart would beat a million times faster. I'd suddenly have to pee. I'd go, hide in my room so I could avoid the whole situation. The whole family was grateful when my dad decided that he didn't want to eat dinner with us, because we had a family dinner every night. And every so often we got a break. We could eat dinner without that constant anger and that constant tension that was everywhere. And so, as a side effect of going within like that, that's actually how the other traumas happen, because I was kind of set up as a victim, in a victim mindset. And we've talked about that before, where you think that you're helpless and hopeless and there's nothing that you can do. And so predators kind of swoop in and they take advantage of the situation of a kid that doesn't have any support systems in place. So one trauma, let's say verbal abuse, or having a parent that's a narcissist for whatever reason, whether it's mental health, whether it's past trauma, whether it's just their temperament, what it does, one of the effects on the brain that happens is that a child learns to disassociate, because it's the only tool that they have. They don't have anything else. They're too small to protect themselves. They feel out of control. They don't have anybody that they can turn to and talk to about it. And if they do, they typically end up minimized or told that they're blowing it out of proportion, because people really don't want to deal with what kids are going through. It's a big thorny problem, and it's best just to ignore it and tell the child that they need to get over it or control themselves. What happens as a result is our brain the two hemispheres of our brain start to disconnect a little bit, and we start to become disassociated from things. And then children will become disassociated just by the triggers. And so, they can see something like my dad pulling into the driveway, or my other big trigger was footsteps. When I would hear footsteps on the floor above me, if I was in the basement, if there were footsteps, it meant that somebody might be coming downstairs and I'd have to be, on my guard. And for years, for decades, when I would hear, before I started to really do my work, when I would hear footsteps on a floor above me, my heart would start to race. Or when I'd hear a car pull into the driveway, I'd immediately start to freak out and go into all my fight or flight coping skills. As you can tell, I still work through some of that stuff now too. There's still a lot of work to do, where when you hear certain things, when certain environmental factors happen, our body immediately goes into that fight or flight. And one of the ways that we cope with that, especially as children and as adults, is by disassociating. And so verbal abuse, where a child feels constantly randomly attacked, so they have no control over it, it's unexpected, and if they don't have a support system, if they don't have an adult that can help them navigate through that experience, then it ends up being trauma. And it ends up going underground and lodging in the body somewhere, and eventually turns into other problems, heart problems, stomach problems, things like that, until you're able to work these things through. And it causes disassociation, even as an adult, triggered by all sorts of random things. There's this beautiful, beautiful woman that I'm working with, and she's had multiple traumas in her life. And it doesn't take much for her to disassociate. You know, and half the time she doesn't even know what triggered her to disassociate. It was some sound, it was some word, it was some look. And disassociation is when we check out, when we go to a different part of ourselves, a part that isn't our body, a part that isn't us. We go someplace else. Now, as a benefit, you can work this disassociation a little bit to start to become an observer, to give yourself distance, because that's the beauty of disassociation, because it gives you a little bit of distance from the problem, from the issue that's going on, so that you can start to gain a little bit of perspective. It's a wonderful coping mechanism when you truly are helpless, but it's not so good when you hear a car pull into the driveway and you go into disassociation, right? It's not good. So, verbal abuse from a narcissist is just as traumatizing, mentally, emotionally, and physically, as all of the, other things that people hang their hat on for trauma. I mean, on one hand, I tell people that I was fortunate that something happened to me, because then I was able to say, see, something happened to me. Something big that everybody has to recognize was really a problem. But bullying and narcissist verbal abuse is very sneaky. They never do it in public where other people can see them. It's always in private. They'll never apologize. It's always about control. You can't have happy moments because it makes the narcissist feel insecure. A whole variety of things happen that trigger a narcissist to go into one of their rages or go into one of their episodes. And irregardless of why, it's still, for you, unexpected. You can't control it. And unless you've got people in your life to help you process through it, it just adds to the trauma until it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it starts to become a health problem that you can't ignore, or a serious problem that you can't ignore. So I want you to take seriously if you experienced any regular amount of bullying or verbal abuse or family tension that happened when you were a kid. And in reality, when I start to talk to women who are in narcissistic relationships and they're not quite sure how they got there, we start to look at the pattern of how they were treated when they were young and how their body coped with it. Because it ends up, and it's not for forever, because if you start to do this work, if you start to do this integrating work, if you start to reclaim all the different parts and pieces of your soul, then it's able to all blend in. And you don't have to disassociate. When you're able to move the emotions that you've been pressing down and suppressing for all those years, you learn you don't have to disassociate. It doesn't, the car coming into the driveway or the footsteps on the floor above don't have to hijack you. don't have to cause you to check out and go someplace else. Now, some of the symptoms of longer-term narcissist verbal abuse is one is overthinking and insecurity. If you know somebody that's starting to get more insecure, they overthink everything, they're constantly worrying, if they don't want to take any sort of risks, any sort of social risks or things like that, consider the fact that those are triggers or possibly triggers for them, that they've been triggered and they've been verbally abused, and this is how they're handling it. When it happens for longer periods of time, you end up with chronic anxiety, you end up with PTSD, you end up with immune system disorders, you end up with digestive disorders, because it's the body trying to cope with this toxic load of emotions that you've been storing in your body. Because remember, emotions are chemicals that your brain releases and your body releases, and then unless you process through it, it stays stuck until you actually do. Now, what about when you, being a normal human being, end up triggering and abusing somebody else? Let's say your dog or your child, somebody or something that is really sort of helpless to your experience. Here's the way out of that. Remember, trauma is unexpected. You can't control it, and there's nothing there to help you process through it. So in reality, let's say that you are triggered and you behave in a way that reminds you of the narcissist. You behave in a way that reminds you of the people who hurt you in your past. Now, our normal reaction is, I don't want to be like that. And we have shame and we have guilt, and there's so much energy around it. For the longest time, I was the nicest person somebody would ever find, because I never wanted to be like the people who would hurt me, because I never wanted to do that. And part of it is because I didn't process through those emotions that happened at the time. And so my brain thought it was either or. You were either a really nice person that nothing ever bothered you and you kept everything under control at all times, or you were a raving lunatic that had, all sorts of crazy problems. And I didn't want to be the raving lunatic, and so I kept everything under control. I kept everything under wraps. Now, the thing is that's not very human. So let's say that you get angry at your daughter. Let's say that happens. You can avoid being the narcissist in their life. You can avoid being the bully in their life by helping them process through what happened, helping them process through their family. And you take what could be, or was for you, a very lifelong, brain-altering sort of experience. You can take what for you was a really horrible experience, and you can turn it into a gift by helping someone process through how to handle their own feelings, how to forgive themselves, how to deal with other people who behave in narcissistic ways, how to do all this. When you help someone that maybe you've attacked, that you think you might have traumatized in some way, by helping them process through it, by being there for them, by letting them express their feelings, by holding a sacred space, by giving them tools, the same tools that you use, by being there for them, it goes from being a trauma to something that helps them learn how to navigate the world even better, learn how to deal with the narcissists that will come up in their lives, learn how to avoid toxic situations, how to recognize and identify them quickly, and tell themselves and recognize that they don't deserve this, that they don't have to deal with this, that there's lots of other options out there for experiences and situations, and they don't have to stay with this one. That's what comes on the other side of the processing. So if you have been triggered and are behaving in a way because your brain was wired differently, because you were verbally bullied or attacked as a child as a regular basis, then when you find somebody who helps you process through and you help other people process through it, it becomes a gift. It becomes something that makes our life richer and gives us wisdom and insight and understanding. So, yes, I get the question kind of regularly of, oh my gosh, am I a narcissist? As in, when someone feels like they had outbursts or behaved in ways which were strongly emotional. And yes, we all have that capability of being a narcissist, because we all can, especially if we've been damaged. There's physical brain damage from it. So yeah, we have to have compassion for it, but you don't get a pass. You have compassion for it, and then you help use it as a stepping stone for the people that maybe that you took it out on, or for yourself. You use it as an opportunity, as a stepping stone. Because yes, if you had verbal abuse when you were an adolescent, especially if you were an adolescent, or while your brain was still developing and you couldn't process through it, and you ended up disassociating on a regular basis, which is the same thing that happens when you have bigger traumas, when bigger, nastier things happen in your life, that you either witness physical abuse, or you have sexual abuse outside the home, or other sorts of things like that. You're disassociating. Your brain is doing the exact same thing. Okay? So have compassion and process through it. And if you do it to somebody else, yes, you behaved badly, have compassion and help them process through it. And if you do that, then it becomes a really wonderful journey of reclaiming who you are. Okay? So yes, you were damaged, even if nobody thought that you were, even if nobody validated it, even if nobody saw it, or were witness to it. Yeah, you were. It's time to start fixing it, okay? Time to start healing those breaches in our brain and reclaiming those parts of our soul. So, what's the homework assignment for today? Today, what I want you to do is I want you to write down your triggers. I want you to write down some of the triggers, and you probably know what a bunch of them are. Mine were footsteps on the floor, and a car pulling into a driveway. And it could be silence. Silence was a big trigger for me. Or when I could feel somebody's energy, when they got angry or irritated or frustrated, and I could feel that would trigger me too. So I want you to write down your triggers, okay? And I want you to give yourself a safe space that's loving and compassionate and nurturing, that nobody's going to bother you, and you are surrounded by things that keep you feeling good so that you don't get trapped in it. And I want you to revisit some of these triggers, because even remembering the car pulling into the driveway, remembering the footsteps, remembering how it felt, you're able to then bring the emotion up and hold it in a safe space, hold it in a sacred space where you can say, hey, I'm really glad you're here. Thanks for coming. You did a great job in protecting me for so many years, and it's time that I loved you, and it's time that you were allowed to be present and be heard and be witnessed, because that was a terrible thing that happened. You have to do that for yourself, or you can find a really good therapist that can help you do it too, or a really good coach like me. But the person who really needs to do it is you. You really need to be having those loving words for those parts and pieces of you that you buried, that are still being triggered. So give yourself a little bit of processing time, and let's go a little bit deeper maybe than you've been. Let's go a little bit deeper than the surface. Let's look at the things which still trigger your body and start to witness and let yourself process through it and get rid of it. And no, you're not going to do it all in one sitting. Sometimes it can take a long time. But every time that you do, every time that you let it come up and you process through, it has a little bit less control, a little bit less hold on you, and you've reclaimed a little bit more of you, okay? So I want to hear how that turns out. Put it in the group. I want to hear what some of your triggers were, because I'm sure that they are very diverse and that we have a bunch of similarities too, okay? So I want to hear what they are. Now, if you're interested in doing one-on-one coaching, well, actually, if you're interested in doing group coaching, look above. In the title is the link to the group coaching that I do. It's a call every Tuesday. It's a private Facebook group. It's support in that way. And you can just do the coaching. Or I've partnered up with the Narcissist book, and I'll give you the link to the Narcissist book tomorrow morning. And let's get you on a really good journey. Let's get you the help that you need, okay? because you don't have to stay like this. You don't have to feel trapped or stuck in your nervous system or your memories, or feel like your body's betraying you again. You don't. You really don't. There's a whole process that you can do that helps you change this and take your life back. Because it's not about the narcissist. It's about you loving you, and it's about you growing up, and it's about you reclaiming the different parts and pieces of yourself, and it's about your body healing itself, finally, because you're able to love and accept it the way that it is. Okay? So I think that's it. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And for those of us who celebrate, tomorrow is July 4th. I'll still do a live stream in the morning. It should be a lot of fun. And happy holiday. Talk to you later.